welcome to another episode of Two Rivers Tuesday. We are glad you are listening and or watching. I'm here with John Teague. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Great. All right, so question for you.
Okay.
On Sunday, you showed us this lovely picture from 1998 of you and Katie, which I have to agree with you. Katie looks the exact same.
The exact same.
She really
She
does.
has not changed a bit.
Really. I'm not just flattering her. Like, she really looks the same.
Yeah.
You, however, did change a bit over the years. But in that photo, for those who didn't see it, let me just describe what was going on. It's Katie and John in 1998, and John's hair is what really stuck out to me. It's completely covers your forehead in like a really swoopy, spiky way. So talk to me about how you got that look, how you styled that.
That's what you want to know? Like, how did I style that?
Yeah. What did it take to get that, like how you wanted it?
So here's what I remember of that time in my life with that hair. It was like, I had these long bangs, and they were almost feathered.
Yes.
You know, but I don't remember like doing any like kind of feathering thing.
Okay.
But if you took a comb and just sort of combed through them,
Swooped it over,
it would give this sort of swoopy feel to it. But there was no product.
Wow.
No product in that hair.
It looked like there was product. And was that dyed, or was that your natural color?
That was my natural color.
Really?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It had like a yellowish to it.
Yeah, I was super blonde.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now everybody tells me I have red hair, and I think it's because I have a red beard. Would you say I have red hair?
Not at all. I'm looking at your hair now, and I would call it like dirty blonde gray.
Yeah. Wait. What?
Yeah, on the side. It is definitely gray. The white territory.
Yeah, that's what being a dad of 3 teenage girls and being a pastor will do to your hair.
So speaking of gray hair, how old were you in 1998?
Let's see. I don't remember in that picture. So I was either 18 or 19, depending on when that picture was taken.
It was like your freshman year of college.
It was after my. I think that particular picture was in the summer of 1998. So I had not turned 19 yet, but it was after my freshman year of college. Okay. I was kind of young for my graduating class.
Yes.
And
Yeah. What year did you get that earring?
That year.
I
think it was that year. As soon as I turned 18.
Was that a hoop?
Oh yeah, for sure.
A silver hoop?
Yep. Yep. I was rocking it.
Was
it was cool.
The silver hoop like the only one you ever had, or did you ever put other ones in?
Like studs,
yes.
like diamonds. I didn't ever do that.
Okay,
no,
so
it was always
like
the hoop. It was kind of that was the days of like the silver hoop that maybe had something kind of cool like in the middle of it, like maybe a black kind of small black bead or something.
Oh, yes.
Because there was also that was the time of like hemp necklaces with beads, or like the puka shell kind of things that I think are coming back now, maybe. But I don't know. They kind of look like black eyed peas or something in my mind.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah, that was the extent of but I do remember, like I had the earring, I had the Oakleys on the top of my head, and then I was probably, you just couldn't tell it because I had a tie on, but I probably had like a hemp necklace with beads on.
Yep, that tie was really special.
Sunflowers, I believe.
Is that what that was?
I don't know exactly, but those, yeah.
And so wide.
Was it really wide?
The tie, yes.
Okay.
I remember that was the style.
I just remember looking at it and thinking like, wow, that is butt ugly. What was I doing wearing that?
That was great. Yes, I think you need to post that picture so people can see it if they missed it on Sunday.
I think it's great. Put it on our church social media.
Yeah,
that's great. Everybody can make fun of me.
Yes.
Thanks, Maggie.
You're welcome. In 1998, I was in kindergarten.
You were in kindergarten?
Yes. So
wow.
Around that time, I was going to kindergarten, and I have a distinct picture in my mind from that year. On my first day of kindergarten, I had to wear my Airbrush t-shirt that had a Beanie Baby on the t-shirt in American flag colors. So just picture how tacky that was. It had my name airbrushed on it with a Beanie Baby, and I had to wear that on my first day of kindergarten.
You had to because like somebody made you, or you wanted to?
Yes, I felt convicted that is what I needed to wear that
absolutely
day.
Needed to wear this Airbrush t-shirt, which I'd like to know where you got that Airbrush t-shirt.
I'm sure like at the beach or something like that. I can remember when that was the thing. Like anytime we went to the beach, you had to get an Airbrush t-shirt.
I love that you.
Wings.
That's right. That's right. Or when I think of Airbrush the first place I think of is Gatlinburg, right? Like you get an Airbrush t-shirt, some fudge, and maybe like a sword from the China Bazaar place. But then after that, I quickly moved to the beach where you can also get fudge, I'm sure, and an Airbrush t-shirt.
Yep.
I just love that you were so bold and confident that you wanted to wear that. Like, can you imagine like pretty much any other year of your life like wearing that?
Yeah.
So that's pretty awesome.
Yes.
Hey, I almost got paddled in kindergarten.
Oh no.
Yeah, I have
Paddling was a thing. Corporal
punishment.
Yes. Wow, I wonder what year that stopped in schools.
Well, I'll tell you this. That wasn't the first time I almost got paddled. I almost got paddled. And I think I told this story to Grace Christian Academy a few weeks ago, whenever it was, a month or so ago when I spoke at their chapel. I told this story about how I almost got paddled in middle school. I was in 7th grade.
Oh,
and that was
too old.
That was scary. That was really scary. But I remember I have like, and it's like I mentioned Inside Out in the sermon on Sunday, I have like a core memory of like fear that when I almost got paddled in Miss Stoddard's kindergarten class. And I remember she had a paddle, and on one side of it was a kid with a smiley face painted on it, and on the other side of it was a kid with a crying face on it. Oh my God. Like, this was how they motivated kids in kindergarten in public school back in the day. Alpine Crest Elementary. Shout out to Alpine Crest, the very best. And the reason I almost got paddled was because at lunch I thought it would be fun to take my roll and stuff it in another kid's milk carton.
Oh my God.
His name was Daniel. I remember it vividly.
The hole on those like milk cartons is tiny, so you were like really doing work.
No. Like I like opened it up all the way up, and then stuffed my roll down in his milk. He told on me, and Miss Stoddard almost paddled me.
Wow,
and
that's
I don't know what
a severe consequence.
I know. Well, thankfully I didn't get paddled.
Okay,
but it marked me. Whatever. She was old then, so I just imagine I can picture this kind of like old teacher in my mind, you know, in kindergarten, and I know that's all relative, right?
Yeah.
She might have been
30.
40. Yeah. You know, like I'm 44 now.
So old.
Oh my gosh. She had gray hair. Like, that's me. That's me now. Okay, we digress, but that was my kindergarten memory.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
wow.
hilarious.
So you were in kindergarten in 1998.
Yep.
So that was a big year for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Big year. All right. So 1998, we talked about this on Sunday.
That's right.
And you took us into our Dangerous Prayer series. And so remind us again what the prayers we've covered have been.
Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. That was the first prayer. Second one was search my heart. Psalm 139. And then this past Sunday, we talked about the prayer, break my heart.
Yeah. And so next week is the last week in this series.
That's
and
right.
so over this series, we've been talking about these prayers and calling our church family into praying these dangerous prayers, because we believe that as we pray these, that they will transform our hearts and our lives, and that they'll call us into the kind of more that God has for us and how he wants us to live. And they're dangerous because we're risking kind of the status quo and our surface level way of doing things and our comfort zones.
Yeah.
And so our heart for this series is we really want these prayers to become kind of like cornerstone prayers in your prayer life, where you're praying these on a daily basis maybe, and you're praying these for the rest of your life. It's not just for this series. We believe these prayers are for our walks with Jesus, you know, inevitably.
Yeah.
And so talk to us a little bit about how these prayers can be used in our daily life, or how you have found yourself praying these since this series has started.
Yeah. These are daily prayers, and so it doesn't need to feel like, okay, I need to pray this big kind of momentous prayer and then see what happens. I mean, you could certainly do that, right? And you could say, I'm just going to spend a season on this prayer, but you could also just open up your Bible in your daily reading plan, and in what you're reading, begin to ask the Lord, is there something about what I'm reading that I'm not believing? That's that whole, and then help my unbelief, right? I mean, you're kind of in all of that asking God to search your heart. Hey, search my heart, God. Show me, am I not really believing the promise that I'm reading here? Am I not really believing that what you have for me is good here. Show me that. Search my heart and show me that. Or perhaps it's a sinful thing in my life, and I am disobeying a very direct, command right here that I read this morning. Search my heart and show me that sin. Or maybe it is, the whole break my heart thing could very well be break my heart over my unbelief, break my heart over my sin, break my heart over the fact that other people don't know this hope or this joy or have this same faith that I do. Break my heart over that.
Yeah, those are good examples. I found myself praying the search my heart one in conflict. So when I've had moments where I'm like, honestly, it was a moment where Jake and I were getting into a heated discussion. And so in the moment where I kind of had some time to myself and I'm processing my emotions and my thoughts, how I'm feeling, that prayer thankfully came to mind of search my heart. Because oftentimes in conflict, both people have sin going on. And so that's where the brokenness comes in. But it was super helpful to take a moment to allow the Lord to search my heart and to reveal where I was so in the wrong in so much of that conflict, and to soften my heart towards Jake and towards just seeing my own sin in it. So I think that one is a really helpful one to pray when you're feeling just relational conflict and relational tension, to ask, okay, where is my sin playing a role in this dynamic? And then the other time I found myself praying one of these recently was when I was feeling frustrated toward a person, and I was feeling this anger rising up in me towards this person. And then thankfully, I feel like the Lord did just break my heart for that person, which softened my heart towards them. And instead of having like anger and frustration towards them, he moved my heart to compassion for them, which then like compelled me to love them and sacrifice for them and not feel frustration and anger towards them.
Yes.
And so I think that whenever we find ourselves angry at someone or annoyed with someone, which we so often can have that come up, asking the Lord, break my heart for this person and soften my heart towards them so that I can love them well. So that's times when I've been seeing those prayers come up in day-to-day life. And so
that's really good.
Our hope is that you're experiencing the same thing, that in day-to-day life, you're seeing these opportunities and the Lord is calling these to mind and you're leaning in to these prayers. And our hope is that just continues in all of our lives. So the prayer that we focused on Sunday was break my heart. And so from talking to you, I know that there was a lot you were kind of sorting through as you were preparing for this sermon. So talk a little bit about how preparing for this sermon, what was going on in your heart as you were preparing.
What was going on in my heart as I was preparing this is not pretty. It was ugly. I mean, I texted someone about this late last week and just used the 3-letter word ugh, like UGH. Like it's the only thing I knew how to describe, because I was just realizing like I don't want my heart to be broken. Like what would that look like there? Like that's a scary thing that felt dangerous. If I'm really honest, I don't want my heart to be broken. I don't want to feel that way. I don't know what's going to happen if my heart truly breaks for someone or something. Does that mean am I going to have to do something about that feeling? And am I going to have to make a sacrifice? And I'm not even trying to relate with everybody. That was just the stuff that was in my heart. And, I've been referencing the book, Dangerous Prayers by Craig Rochelle. And I had made a note of this and it's putting words to what was in my heart. He was writing in his book about a group of people who were walking through these prayers, and they had just in honesty reached out to him. And they were just saying that the cry of our hearts seemed clear. Keep us comfortable, God. Keep us warm and cozy. Don't break us. It would hurt too much. Please just keep things going smoothly. That wasn't specifically what I was praying, but by being afraid of this prayer, that's kind of what I was saying. And that's why I was afraid of it.
Yeah.
I want my life to be relatively comfortable. And I would just go on to say that I think part of the reason that I was afraid to ask God to break my heart is that in some way I didn't trust that if he did that it would be good for me. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Or that somehow he would break my heart and then just leave me there alone to figure it out and maybe drown in, like there was a lack of trust for the other side of the breaking. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so that was the fear and kind of like the lie you were believing.
Yeah.
So what is the truth?
The truth is, if God breaks my heart for something, it's for a purpose, and he has a plan that he wants me to join him in. But whatever that is, he's going to be with me in it. And he's going to, I would tell anybody this in any other circumstance, because the scriptures tell us at the end of the book of Hebrews, he will equip you with everything you need to do his will.
Yeah.
I've told just hundreds of people that on hundreds of occasions, right? And that's the same thing if he breaks your heart for someone or something, like he'll give you everything you need to do whatever he asks you to do about it.
Yeah, that's good. He doesn't leave you in that sadness.
That's right.
It has a purpose, yeah. So talk a little bit about what is on the other side of our sadness. Like what can that blessing after the breaking look like or feel like in our hearts?
Yeah. Gosh, do you have an answer for that?
I think that when we are broken and when he does break our hearts, I think that we get to like empathize with people in ways that we wouldn't have previously. And so I think that what's at stake if our hearts never break is a real numbness to pain and a real lack of sympathy for others, a lack of living in reality. I mean, our world is broken and there are real tragic, awful, evil things in our world. And so when we don't allow our hearts to break over those things, it's truly like we are not living in reality. It's like, but when we let our hearts fully break and when we lament and enter into that sadness, I think we have the blessing of living in reality. And like we can see clearly this world that we're living in, and therefore our hope for the life to come can grow also. I think that's what this lament idea that you talked about is a gift to us, because as we lament, we begin to grow in our depth of trust and our depth of hope.
Yes. Yeah. I think we need to come back to that. But I want to just say that I think about the Apostle Paul, who was quoting Jesus. At least he said he was quoting Jesus. He said, it's better to give than to, it's more blessed to give than to receive. And of course, he's talking there about financially giving and living generously, that it's far more of it's more of a blessing to do that than to even receive. I think there's something to that about being broken. There's far more blessing on the other side of that than to avoid it and then just sort of live in a very self-focused way.
Yes.
And then you kind of become perhaps narcissistic and and you're not even aware of it.
Yeah.
And everything's about you. I think that's a risk, really, in not being broken.
Yes.
But the blessing is like, gosh, we've all felt that. We've all felt what it feels like to be brokenhearted for the plight of someone else, and to be able to do, even if it's just one little thing, whether it's sending them a text to letting them know like you're on my heart, or whether it's sending them a DoorDash gift card or making them a meal or whatever it may be, like when you're broken over the situation of someone else, there is a tremendous blessing in that.
Yeah. I think it's boils down to like our flesh versus the spirit. Like everything in our flesh is telling us like, go the easy way, do what's comfortable, preserve, don't let your heart break, do what's best for you,
Yes.
right? But if we follow the way of the Spirit, it's totally upside down and countercultural and opposite of what our flesh is telling us. And it's telling us, yeah, it's better to give than receive. Our flesh is telling us, no, it's better to receive than
Yes.
give.
Yes.
But when we follow the Spirit and he leads us into that way everlasting, that way that is willing to sacrifice, willing to give, willing to be broken, there is so much joy, and true life is found as we follow that, which is what Jesus says when he says, if you lose your life, you will find it.
Yes.
And so I think it's just praying, Jesus, help me really believe that.
Yeah.
I believe, but I don't really. So help our unbelief when it feels so crazy to lose our lives and we don't want to be broken and we don't want to sacrifice. Help us to believe that true life is really found on that way.
And the soundtrack to that is Eminem, Lose Yourself.
Yes,
That's what I'm like.
losing the moment.
That's what I'm
I don't
thinking
know
right
any
now.
of the words. I just know
It's
the beat.
probably not necessary, really.
Yes, yeah.
But at least the beat kind of gets you motivated, right? Just lose yourself.
Yes.
That's what Jesus was saying.
Oh, man. So what is it in us? What are some of the other reasons that we kind of like shy away from feeling this sadness? You mentioned some of them, like we like to fix things.
Yes.
And so that makes it hard, or this is just not a fun thing to feel. So what
Yep.
are some of the other things?
Well, I just think, and you opened my eyes to this, we can just get overwhelmed. We're afraid we'll just be overwhelmed,
Yes.
right? And I think it is kind of tied to not wanting to feel not want to feel that sadness. And it's tied to the fact that we're fixers. And so if it can be very overwhelming for like, that's a problem that's too big to fix. And I think that out of that, like we can be so overwhelmed by the hurt in the world around us that we almost don't hurt for anything.
Exactly.
We grow numb.
Yes. Yeah, I think I've seen it kind of worded that like we just were not meant, our minds and our like selves were just not meant to be able to take in all the brokenness that we see. So think
Yeah.
about like the 24-hour news cycle and
Yes.
all that you see on social media. And so mix that with just the brokenness that you also see in your own heart and in your own life and when you're sinned against, and the brokenness of and that we see in our church family. I mean, it's just overwhelming. And
Yes.
so our hearts can kind of get hardened because we're like, gosh, like it's just so broken. What's the point? I can't do anything. I can't fix any of it. So I get apathetic towards it or cynical, and I just throw my hands up and don't do anything.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a real danger when we just like are not affected by any of it because we've just checked out.
Yeah.
So I think if we find ourselves in that place, like if you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, that's me. Like I'm so overwhelmed by it all. I feel like I can't fix it. It's just frustrating. So I've thrown my hands up. What do we do if that's where we realize our hearts are?
Gosh, well, I don't know if this is going to answer your question, but my mind was going to that like age old story of the child who's skipping down the beach where all of these starfish have washed ashore and they're out of the water and they need to be back in the water. And, the child just like one by one starts picking them up and throwing them back in the water. And it's like taking forever. And someone comes along and says, there's thousands of these, like, how could you possibly make a difference? Right. And the child picks one up, throws it in the water and says, well, I made a difference for that one.
Yes. That's
and
good.
I think about a principle that I learned long ago from Andy Stanley, who talked about, doing for one what you wish you could do for many, the one for the many.
Yeah.
And how sometimes you can't do something like this for everyone, but you can do something like this for one person.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's really good. I think it can feel so overwhelming, but if we are led by the Spirit, just trusting that if you listen to his voice, he will lead you to do that next right thing.
Yes.
And if you're obedient, I feel like it almost like grows the capacity of your heart.
Yeah.
Like as you step into those things little by little, your capacity to care and your capacity to have compassion and to do something begins to grow.
That's right.
And that's a work of the Spirit. That is only God can do this in our hearts. And so I often feel this cynicism in my own heart. And so my prayer is, Lord, break my heart. Like, it's not fun to live like that. It feels easier, but actually it's not fun to walk around in that cynicism. And so asking the Lord to break your heart is scary, but it's way more, there's so much life on the other side of it, like we talked about.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that kind of lament language and those steps that we can kind of walk through if you're like, okay, well, how do I enter into that lament, or how do I enter into that sadness? What are some of those, what's some language we can put to that?
Yeah, well, the pattern that we looked at, that we see throughout the Psalms, is turn to God, register your complaint, if you will, make your complaint, make your requests, ask him to do something, and then trust him.
Yes.
Trust him no matter what the answer is or what the timing of it is. Just trust in his character, even though things are not as they ought to be. They're not even in alignment with his good will and purpose, so to speak. That people are hurting, that people, that they're being abused, whatever it may end up being. Like to trust in his goodness and his eternal character. That's kind of that last step. So we see that throughout the Psalms, the psalmists praying just like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's just good. It's a good pattern for us to remember and we can use this language of lament when we're like, I don't know what to do, but I know that I can go before the throne of God and make my complaint before him and say, this is not right.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's really helpful. I think it's good to give people and give yourself permission to do that, because I think it can be easy to almost like not want to acknowledge how messed up things are. Because it's like, as Christians, we want to like keep God's reputation good and like tie a pretty bow on it and like call out the silver linings, like, but God is still good. And it's like, yes, all of that is true, but we can also, like I said, like live in the reality that yes, and acknowledge the brokenness and like let ourselves feel that. And that doesn't mean that God's not good. I think we kind of sometimes can live in that false dichotomy of like, well, I can't like really enter into the lament. Is that not believing that God is still good? And like both can exist hand in hand. Like we can believe in God's sovereignty, believe that he's good and trust him. And in all of that, still acknowledge and feel the brokenness and be sad about it.
Yes.
That's okay.
To say, that's sad.
Yes.
You've gone through some deep pain. You've lost a child. That's sad.
Yes.
Let's not pretend like it's not.
Yes.
And let's not be afraid to sit in that, because that sadness is speaking to a great hope or love that you possessed in your heart that went unfulfilled.
Yeah.
And I think there's beauty in sitting in that, and I also think there's great help in that. I mean, I alluded to that scene from the movie Inside Out, where sadness comes and sits next to Bing Bong. If you've not seen it, that feels like totally out of context, but it was just powerful that she didn't have some kind of clinical psychological counsel for him. She just said, she acknowledged what he was feeling and then said, that's sad.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah. And he was able to move through that pain because someone was able to sit next to him and acknowledge it with him.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's so good.
There's some power in that for us in our relationships.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's what we are called to as church family, is to lament with one another, mourn with one another. And so often that looks like just acknowledging like, yes, that is sad. This is not how it should be.
That's right.
And like remembering the hope that we have that in the life to come, God will fix everything.
That's right.
And he'll wipe every tear from our eyes. And that's where our hope is. And it's okay that it is hard right now. And we can acknowledge that.
Yeah, I think that really does. It's a conversation for probably another day, but it really does reveal something about perhaps where we still need to grow in our faith and trust in God, because there's something in us that perhaps doesn't quite want to believe that that things can not be as they should be, and God can still be sovereign and good.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Like you were saying, we need to protect his reputation, but by doing that, we're almost denying, that the reality that exists all around
and that's
us.
not helpful.
And then there's no hope for like what will be, what we believe will be.
Yes.
I mean, that's going to be amazing, and that's God's design and His plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
So yet again, another example of where we need help with our unbelief, right?
That's right.
Like that's where we can ask God, help us believe that in the life to come, that like our hope, we have an anchor, and like our hope we won't be disappointed, and
That's
all
right.
of that is going to be redeemed and resolved. So yeah, that's where we need help. And so in closing, you also mentioned the Hebrews passage that we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness. So whether you are feeling broken over circumstances in your life right now, or you're feeling broken for the people in your life who are hurting, or you're not feeling broken at all,
Yes.
we probably all land in all of those places a
Yeah.
little bit, but just looking to Jesus, who is able to sympathize, who feels the sadness with us,
Yes.
and is our hope and can handle our sadness.
That's right. Amen.
Amen. All right. Well, thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week.
See ya.